Hey everybody, welcome back. So we're in the midst of our series on snake behaviors. As part of this series, we're breaking down each one of the different main behaviors in snakes, learning how to recognize them, and learning how we can best manage those, some techniques for, handling them, changing their frame of mind and stuff like that. So we've gotten through our introduction, our outline. We've talked about what they're like when they're sleeping. Today we're going to be talking about defensive and aggressive behaviors in snakes and how we can manage it today on Intrepid Exotics. Whether you're a lifelong keeper or just getting started, help us encourage responsible keeping, conservation, and public education in the interest of keeping our reptiles safe and healthy as we protect them for future generations. You're invited to spend time with us as we experience these awesome animals together on Intrepid Exotics. Now, for those of you guys that follow us here, you know that we really don't have any defensive snakes, any aggressive snakes or anything like that to work with here. We've kept the same collection for a long time. They're really well socialized. So we've got to take a little different approach today. Since we don't really have any defensive snakes, and I'm not going to be putting my animals in a position where I'm intentionally making them afraid of me, we've got some videos that we've found from across the internet that demonstrate what a snake looks like when they're defensive, when they're feeling threatened and so forth, and some mistakes that handlers, some intentional mistakes, some innocent mistakes that are made that really exacerbate this whole thing and makes it worse for the keeper, makes it worse for the animal, and in some cases it can even really hurt the public image of snake keepers in general. So we're going to sit down and we're going to look through those videos. I'm going to kind of describe the behaviors and then make suggestions on things that I would do differently in those situations, because I've been in a lot of those situations that I'm going to show you and definitely managed them a little bit differently. You're going to see that snakes generally don't want to bite us. They don't want to fight us. They would much rather move another direction and leave us alone and be left alone. So understanding that can really go a long ways too towards understanding how we can work with these guys, especially if we get one and we don't really understand why it's swinging at us and musking and just being upset. Another good resource for that too is the series that we did on the Sri Lankan python. There's like a 10-part series where we took that snake from the very first handling session where it was completely terrified of people and took it all the way through to the point where we could take it out without getting struck, without getting musked on, and trust him hanging around on our necks and really letting him enjoy being kept and interacting and letting us enjoy not being bit. So I will put that in the end screen of this video, as well as a link to the series for this playlist. So let's go ahead and dive into these videos. We'll do a little bit of a critique, point some things out to you guys, and then we're going to go down to the reptile room with our 16 and 17 foot reticulated pythons, and we're going to do some handling with them as well, just to kind of show, granted they're not going to be fighting, they're not going to be biting, things of that nature, but we can show the techniques and show what I'm talking about with proper usage of the hook, way to read your behaviors and things like that, and things not to do to upset them. So let's go over here and check these out. Okay, so we've all heard the term aggressive snakes, defensive snakes. And there's a lot of times, a lot of us, even myself, when somebody says that snake's aggressive or that snake's mean, a lot of us will say, no, that snake's defensive. Snakes aren't aggressive. Well, I've kind of changed my tune on that a little bit. We try to soften the verbiage that we use with some of our snakes, just to kind of make them a little bit more palatable for people that don't like them. But we've got to admit, there are times that we can run into aggressive snakes for any number of reasons, most of which being some snakes will get pretty aggressive around breeding time. You'll see some of them that will strike really quickly and just get an overall bad demeanor. And it's just like any other animal too. If they're abused, if they're mistreated, if they're not kept properly, then, over time that can make an animal aggressive as well. It's just like with anything else. They're uncomfortable long enough, that fear of people will make them want to fight all the time if they just don't have any positive experiences to relate to them. So it's kind of a distinction to be made there. And I think it's a really good idea to look at some of the things that people do that will make our snakes defensive, because a lot of times what happens is people will get new animals. The animal never really gets comfortable with them. You know, say for instance, you know, you've been keeping ball pythons or something for a long time and you adopt a 10-foot reticulated python. Now that snake is naturally, and in a lot of cases, every animal is different. A lot of times they will take a little while to acclimate. They'll be a little nervous around you. They're in unfamiliar territory and stuff like that. So they can be bitey, they can be afraid. And if that makes the keeper afraid too, and they just can't, you know, bridge that gap between them, then that can be a problem animal forever. And you can take a good animal that was, you know, otherwise perfect with its last keeper, move it to a new keeper, and if they never get past that, that can over time make that snake, you know, naturally more defensive and aggressive and scared of people. So it's really important, especially for anybody that's getting ready to get into bigger constrictors or bigger snakes in general, to really understand why snakes get defensive. And I've got a couple really good examples that we're going to go into here in a second. The one thing that I want to note is that a snake's general tendency is to try to get away from you. They want to feel secure. You know, you've got to think that even if you've got a 20-foot snake, at one point it was a 2-foot hatchling. So that snake comes into the world knowing that everything alive can eat it. Fish and birds and mammals and anything in their environment can eat them. So they grow up, the ones that survive are the ones that recognize those threats and get away from them and so forth. So a snake's natural tendency is to get away, go hide. If they can't, the only thing they've got left at their disposal is to strike and to bite and so forth. And if we don't overcome that when they're young and get them feeling comfortable, all that stuff will carry over until they're bigger. And then you walk up on them once they're a bigger snake, and you know, if they're afraid of you, there's a good chance they're going to bite at you. So, and one thing that shows this really well, let me put this up here real quick. This is one instance that I found, and this is just stuff that I did a quick browse through the internet, and I found some examples of things that I'm looking for, and this demonstrates what I'm talking about really well. So we've got, I'll leave the sound on that one. But you can see, watch the snake's tongue. You'll see this behavior right here. Hopefully you can see. You see how he's just holding that tongue out there? That's an indicator that the snake feels threat. And they're getting ready to bite. And this keeper right here is just kind of antagonizing him. He knows that the snake's uncomfortable. He's got him backed into a corner. You know, he's showing that the snake's grumpy, he might be scared, doesn't want to be messed with. And this one, it doesn't want to bite him. It just wants him to leave him alone. And you can see he doesn't bite. At some point here, he does manage to start moving the other direction and getting away from him. But this is one defensive behavior that you will see with snakes. And, you know, in a case like this, give them space. You don't, like, in a case like this, anytime I go into my Burmese enclosure, and he will do this sometimes. If he doesn't feel like being messed with, you know, he'll hold his tongue out. He's hissed at me before. And I just back off of him and I give him space. I respect his territory right there. If I've got to take him out, I don't come in from the front in front of his face right here. I'll come in with the hook or with my hand, depending on how comfortable I am with what he's showing me. And just touch him back here, get him moving the opposite direction, and then you can start handling him. And typically once you get your hands on him, especially with a snake like that really doesn't want to bite this guy, once they get moving, you get your hands on them, you can just completely overcome that defensive behavior. And it's never advised to just sit there and continue to do the same thing that you can tell is stressing the animal out. But this is one thing to look for. If you see him, you know, with that tongue just stuck out like that, then you can bet they're pretty stressed out. Now, you guys have heard me talk about Jay from Jay's Prehistoric Pets before. And before I go into that video, I'm going to show you guys some things. Don't get me wrong. It's clear, it's obvious to me that Jay Brewer knows exactly what he's doing. He knows how to read his snakes. He knows what to do. The thing is you can see, and I'm going to point this out in this video, that he's intentionally doing things to make the snake strike at him. You'll hear me say over and over again that, you know, a snake's tail is their gas pedal. And you're putting them back into the enclosure, you hit that tail, they're going to whip it right in. They're really sensitive to their tails being touched. And sometimes if you get a hold of their tail, they'll just turn around and take a strike at you. Really not advisable to mess with their tail at all. They're really sensitive about that. And I'll show you in this video here, we're going to kind of break this down and show how what an otherwise decent experience, you know, because this snake's not mean, it's not aggressive. This is an instance where the keeper isn't innocent, where he is intentionally trying to, you know, anger that animal and stress him out enough to strike at him. Let's go over here and get this playing.
Come on. Come on.
Okay.
It's
So
funny
the first thing you're going to notice about this, and now granted, I haven't pulled hundreds and hundreds of clutches of eggs, but I have pulled some out from under some big retics. Now, it's my understanding, from everybody's opinion I've gathered on this, is that, you know, after these snakes get done laying their eggs, they're pretty spent, you know, and they take time. They're pretty lethargic, need to rest up and so forth. Once they rest up, they're going to have a lot more energy. They're going to be a lot more apt to strike and in defense of their eggs and so forth. I've seen clutches of eggs pulled from underneath big snakes where one person literally lifts up the animal and the other person scoops the clutch out. No problems whatsoever. And this is one instance of somebody who just intentionally does this for attention. And hundreds of people throughout the reptile community have called him on this, and he just ignores it because, frankly, when you got millions of people watching you, the percentage of those people that actually see what's going on is so small, it doesn't matter to him. But I want you to look at this real quick, because when we talk about hook training with our snakes, we use the hook for a couple reasons with these big snakes, because you can't handle an 18-foot snake with a hook. It just doesn't happen. You've got to handle them. You got to handle them. So you'll use the hook to go in and tap their head a little bit just to kind of snap them out of a food response or make sure they're awake. Other than that, with the big snakes, all you're doing with that hook is using it to kind of guide them so that you can get a safe place to get your hand on them. Anything over and above that, which I'm going to show in detail in another video that's coming up, all it does is antagonize them and makes a snake uncomfortable. So what he's doing here is essentially poking a snake with a big stick, and it's just not advisable.
Talk her into like losing her temper,
so
but doing it in a controlled way.
For a second.
Because if she just, I got to win mental game with her. Basically.
You can see the snake
without winning a middle game,
squared off
she'll
against
just strike
him.
at me like
Now
crazy. So I'm literally like right now.
See what he did right here? As soon as he touched that snake, the snake started to retreat. And you know, that's what I'm talking about. When they, you know, a lot of times their first instinct isn't to bite at you. You know, they just want to be left alone. And what I do when I'm handling, and I'll show you guys this when I get down with the snakes, is that, you know, that hook is used just for a couple seconds to get them moving another direction. And then you get your hands on them. And especially if they're a socialized animal, your chances of getting bit are pretty slim. But so this snake's starting to retreat to a position where him or somebody else could have easily handled that animal and gotten that animal off of that clutch of eggs, just completely pulled them away from the box, and it would have been left there with the box.
Telepathically looking at her in the eye going, I'm not backing down. And if I can get
that,
you guys be careful.
She's wanting to get away.
She really is. Look kind of like
at this point right here.
So now she's winding up for the big strike.
And this I need to go back to. At that point, as soon as she started moving away, he could have went in, he could have picked her up from about 3 feet behind her head and guided her off of those things without incident, without any strikes, and it would have been nice and easy. But remember what I was saying about the tail being the gas pedal and how that's the quickest way to antagonize them? What he's doing right here is he's got that snake to a point where she's wanting to retreat. She's trying to be peaceful, and he's like, no, we're going to fight.
She really is.
I'm going to grab your tail.
She really is. Look kind of like a little crazy. So now she's winding up for the
just
big
grabbing
strike.
her tail and pulling it, and what's she do? She turns right back around and looks at him and is like, okay, we're going to fight now.
So
and it's exactly what's going on.
This is when it gets bad.
Square it off.
Now
just
she has all this extra
right
body,
there.
so
He's
it's like a big
intent on
slinky.
making her
If the
strike so
slinky's
that he
this
can
long,
get
it's
some,
only strike
get
this
good
long.
views off of
But
it.
as she gets strong, oh, she's gearing up.
And this isn't an aggressive animal
right now.
She's being
Come on.
defensive
Whoop.
because he knows
Okay.
exactly how to make
Okay.
these animals strike at.
Come on.
You can see a
Come on,
couple
girl.
times there. She tries to
Okay.
tries to
Hey,
escape.
guess what?
Now we're
This
lagging
is
on
where
that for some reason.
I'm an
Let's see.
opportunist, and so it's real simple.
And see, this is another time too. She's trying to get away.
that
Somebody
egg's
could
weird
come
egg.
around the other side of that
Look
counter,
at this.
lift her off, carry her right off the eggs, and be perfectly
Come on.
fine.
Okay, come on, girl. Okay, come on.
I mean, this is the behavior that
I
I
don't want to bite her.
induce
I've
in
had
the
them bite
snakes
their eggs before and rip an
when I
egg.
want to handle them.
So I gotta be careful.
Yeah.
She's still
Everything that she's showing right there is, you know, I just
Okay,
want
you
to
guys
be
be
cool. I
careful.
just want to get away. I don't want to
It
do
goes follow
this.
you out there too. Don't get bit.
You know.
Come on, girl. Whoa, come on.
Yep.
So she's
And he's
loading
putting
up,
the
like
snake in a
I was
position where
Whoa.
she's really got no
Told you.
choice
I
but
knew
to
that was
defend
coming.
herself.
Because she can see.
So
you
this
can
is
kinda
something that
understand what they're thinking.
we'll see kind of
So,
frequently. Can't handle that guy's voice for very long. But I mean, this is something that we'll see pretty frequently. People, you know, getting those snakes out and they want to make a big show of showing how mean they are and so forth. But I mean, this is a docile snake. It really takes a jackass to get an animal like this to strike at you like that. And like I said, Jay knows what he's doing. He's been doing this a long time. He knows how to read their behavior. He knows how to do it peacefully and respectfully. But he wants attention, and this is how he goes about it. He knows exactly what buttons to push on that snake to antagonize her to get her to bite at him. This is one of the reasons I've sent him messages before. I know a lot of other people that have sent him messages before, and he just blows it off because Mr. Hollywood out there would rather get paid than to show people how to properly manage your animals. So when we're talking about defensive and aggressive snakes, this is an example that I think is really, really important to talk about. Just to show how tolerant these animals actually are. Now let's go. I'm going to go to somebody who absolutely has no idea what they're doing. This is about an 11-year-old video that I found. So this guy right here. Now I don't know whether this enclosure is his regular enclosure or if he just put that snake in that thing in order to get it outside. But yeah, that's definitely completely unacceptable. You can see right here, the guy's got this snake out who's obviously not socialized with the dog sitting right there. It wouldn't take anything at all for that dog to get curious and run over and end up getting bitten and wrapped by that snake. And this guy clearly doesn't know what he's doing, so I don't know how good he would be at getting that snake off of the dog. But this here again goes to show that, you know, when we talk about aggression in snakes, this is a snake I would consider aggressive. I wouldn't blame it on the snake. I blame it completely on the keeper, because you can see his living arrangements are completely unacceptable. I could see how any animal that size would go completely berserk living in something like that. And then this guy is so terrified of this animal, he's just making sure that he's got something else to strike at besides him. He's afraid to handle the animal, so he's grabbing it by the tail, which is guaranteed to cause a bad response out of it. That's a no-go. If you're going to have a pet snake, you leave its tail alone. It's just like a basic, you don't do it. That's why, you know, venomous snakes can be so tricky to work with, and they're so quick to strike sometimes, is because, you know, you've got to tail them and hook handle them just from a safety perspective. And you see people that actually do, and I don't encourage this at all, but you see the people that free handle, they can have a lot calmer snakes because, you know, there's a lot more risk involved. But they put the time and the effort into building that relationship with the animal to where it doesn't feel like it's got a strike. If you're handling them, tailing them, and hooking them, you know, which is recommended when you're working with venomous, you're not going to have quite that good of a relationship all the time. They may get used to it. Every animal's a little different. Some can be more tolerant than others. But when you're working with constrictors, there's no reason whatsoever to do all of this. And I'm going to go ahead and go into the rest of this, into the next one. But I just wanted to show examples of, you know, this is going to be an aggressive snake, just because every minute that he's working with this guy is bad. There's nothing positive about this at all. So if you're starting to work with bigger snakes, you know, and you ever catch yourself doing anything like this, just stop, find a mentor, talk to somebody, watch somebody that knows what they're doing, because this is a really good way to get a bad relationship with your animal. Now there's another one here that I want to show you guys. This has been out for some years. This one's got millions of views because it's you know, just again tapping into everybody's fear of giant snakes. But so this is a reticulated python, and you can see from this guy's body language, he feels cornered. The person's clearly hovering over top of him, and it's a defensive snake. There's a couple different ways you can manage something like this. First of all, you can back off. You know, if you don't immediately have to move the animal, then back off. Step off 5-10 feet, whatever it is. Sit down on the floor. Let them feel like, you know, they're not being hovered over, they're not being predated. Because even though this is a big snake, like I said, they start off as small snakes and they get it stuck in their head that everything's out to kill them. So give them space. Let them start moving on their own. If they don't do that, then, you know, in a situation like this, you can always come around with the hook and either, you know, tap right here, tap them back here just to get them moving the other direction. And once they start moving, then you can reach down, start handling them. Typically, they're fine. Some of them can be more obstinate than others. I mean, I've handled snakes that are pretty tricky. But this is the last thing that you want to do, which is what's going on here. When we talk about tap training and hook training and how you use the hook to kind of reposition the snake or tap down a food response, this is what happens when you just use it thinking you're going to calm a snake down. If you're in a bad mood and somebody comes up and pats you on the shoulder, says it's going to be okay, you're fine. You're going to feel better about it. If you're in a bad mood and somebody comes up and just starts doing this and doesn't stop, sooner or later, you're going to turn around and snatch them. Same thing with snakes. He's letting this whole encounter go for way too long. Let me get one where it's in focus. Kind of in focus. Let me see. Quick point on this too, especially when I was doing the videos with the Sri Lankan python, where I was talking about when you've got one that is wanting to strike, that's really defensive. From the moment you open up that enclosure and they square off with you, that whole period of time, that snake's experiencing anxiety and fear. So the shorter we can make that whole experience and the quicker we can get over that, the better it is for them, and the quicker you can move into, you know, the positive handling experiences and getting their mindset shifted from being defensive to just being in thinking mode and exploration mode, whatever you want to call it. This right here, he's just stressing that snake out because he doesn't know how to approach it when it's in that position. And the longer he does that, the longer it's going to drag on with that animal. It's not going to fix itself. The keeper has to do the right thing. So here in a second, the hook is going to come into play. Of course, there's a strike, because who didn't see that coming? Come on. Get back around. Okay, now he got the hook. Now watch here in a second. The snake's going to start biting at the hook. There. Mouth opened up. And see what he's doing there? See how the more he rubs that snake, the more agitated it's getting? He's right over top of the thing's head, and it really can't go anywhere. He's just backing it further and further into the corner, and essentially just pissing it off that much more. You know, biting at the hook, that should be a good indicator to anybody that, okay, what I'm doing right now is not working. Now, there's a couple different things, like I said, that you can do here. One is you know, you can start stroking it over this way with the hook. You move over closer. Well, this way, camera's backwards. But you move over closer to the wall and give that snake an out so it doesn't feel like it's cornered so much. Or you can take the hook and get a hold of the snake with it and just gently drag it so that you can get it in a position where you can get your hands on it. But you got to be careful with that, depending on the makeup of your hook and the size of the snake and all that stuff. You know, that's not a very big contact point on there. You can hurt snakes if you're not careful. But there's nothing wrong with using that hook to kind of drag them across if you need to reposition them to move them, which should have happened right off the bat, instead of this whole tap dance around and I'm afraid of my snake, and then just sitting there and antagonizing him with the hook like that. And I'll let this play for a second so you can see, you know, acting like he's petting it. He's trying to drag it a little bit. Okay. So I want you to pay attention to the second the snake's demeanor changes. He's still kind of stressed out, but he's opened up now. And here in just a second, he reaches down and grabs it. Yeah. This right here is what we're looking for. And you can see he's still stressed out. He starts to drag him out. He's not cornered anymore. He feels like he's got space. And he's going to start to relax in just a second. Right now. Now he's relaxed. Now he's in thinking mode. He's not scared. He can reach down, pick him up, all that other stuff. And I mean, you can see the guy goes nuts. The snake's, you know, not head shy at all. It's clearly used to being handled and all that. But the thing is I don't know whether this is intentional, that he was just wanting to you know, let everybody watch his snake strike or anything like that. But this state could have been achieved in much less time than it was here. You don't have to sit there and spar with your animals like that. You either give them a little bit of space, let them come out of it on their own, or you've got to confidently go in and move them to where you know they need to be so that you can get a hold of them. The longer you make those instances where you're fighting them last like that, the more chance there is of you getting bit, the more stressed the animal's going to get. If they decide to bite and wrap, you got a fight on your hands, you got a big negative experience to deal with. And I don't care who you are, after you get bit by a snake, it makes you hesitant for a little while. And it's just bad all the way around. So I guess to kind of summarize my point on this one, when you go in and you've got an animal like this, who's clearly cornered, who's clearly defensive, you've got two options. One is you either step back, you let them relax, you let them go out on their own, or you can use the hook, go in, guide their head, make them move in a certain direction, or if you need to, just reach in and drag them out. But you know, the longer you let them stay in this spot, you're not going to accomplish anything until you just get in there and start working with and start handling the snake. Now here's another one that same guy, same hook, different snake, but he's got the snake roaming around on the floor. I guess he's wanting to get it moved. This animal's not showing any signs right now of being defensive, except, you know, he's got that hook in its face again. Let me go back to the beginning here, and you can kind of see right now. I wish I would have shown a little bit before, but I mean, he was coming up, long tongue flicks, stretched out, just cruising across the floor. And apparently the snake has learned to hate that hook, because he's going back in there with the hook again, right in his face for no reason. And you can see the snake starting to stress out. And I don't know how long it is between these cuts in that video or whatever, but here he goes with it again. He apparently was antagonizing him with the hook some more, enough to make the snake strike and bite himself. This is just not the way we go about it. There was no reason to even bring that hook out. When that snake was crawling across the ground, you go up about 3 feet behind his head, just get your hands on him, give him a second, let him realize that you're there, and you pick him up. So, I mean, there's some examples of, you know, what a defensive snake looks like. And it's really important that we understand when we're working with these animals, we have so much control over what their frame of mind is. The only caveat to that is we've got to be able to recognize it and have the confidence to go in and know what makes them comfortable and just be able to do it. Now, like I said, my snakes, very unlikely that they're ever going to come at me or going to bite me. That being said, though, even my 16-foot male retic down there came at me a couple months ago. I'm thinking it was a breeding issue that he was having. He was really hyped up. I opened up the enclosure and he shot out at me. This is another one of those times where, and I wish I would have had this recorded, but when a 16-foot male retic takes a swing at you, it gets your attention. And all I did with him is I sat back and I let him lay there on the floor, and I gave him, I think it only took him maybe 30 seconds before he chilled out. I seen his tongue starting to flick and him starting to move, and I went over and picked him up. Never swung at me again. You know, these are apex predators. They're ambush hunters, and it's not uncommon for them to react by instinct to stuff. So apparently when I opened up the door, he reacted. He didn't do anything wrong, but you can't let stuff like that scare you. Like I said, you sit down and you just wait for their frame of mind to change, and then you can handle them again. So let's go downstairs, and we're going to go ahead and close off Niall's enclosure so that we've got that free space there. We're going to get the big snakes in there and let them roam around, and I'll show you guys a couple of the techniques that I talked about. It's not going to be with aggressive snakes, but it will at least kind of demonstrate firsthand what I'm talking about. So let's head down there.
All right, so we got some hands-on time now. We've got Tigger back here. He is my 16-foot, about 70-pound reticulated python. And he's the one that I was talking about earlier, where a couple months ago I opened up the door and he decided to take a swing at me. Well, we're going to go ahead and take him out, and I'm going to kind of show you guys how I approach him and see if I can simulate a couple things that I would be doing if he was actually intent on trying to bite me. I'll treat him as if it's a snake that I'm worried about biting me, and see how close we can get to kind of illustrating what we was talking about. Now, just from a hook perspective, I've got one of these long hooks. I've got this little 2-foot short hook right here. This is the one I'm going to use just to kind of illustrate that, you know, we don't really use this hook very often. Now, he's tucked away in the corner back there. I don't know if you guys can see him or not. Yeah, he's tucked away in the corner. His face is going in the corner. It doesn't look like he really is interested in coming out and interacting right now. So what I'm going to have to do is get in, get him moving away. As soon as he starts moving away, I'm just going to get my hands on him and then start guiding him out. So you'll see how all this stuff works. What's up, buddy? Hey, man. Ready to come out and play? Now, what I'm looking at right here is, of course, like I said, he's back in the corner. He likes his cool side, so that's where he stays a lot of the time. So I'm going to come around to this side. I'm not going to corner him. This is where that one guy was making the mistake where, you know, he was coming in from over here, and it blocks him out. It makes him feel like he's cornered. So I'm going to come in from right beside him. And I'm just going to keep my hook right here. I'm just going to kind of touch him on the side of the head. Or side of the neck, rather. And we're going to try and get him moving. He's not squaring up. See? And he's not looking like he's really wanting to move. So, you'll have to excuse me again because it's warm and humid down here, of course. It's a reptile room. So, since he's not really exhibiting any signs of wanting to move, I'm just going to set this hook on him right here. I'm going to put my hand on him. Come on, bud. Come on. There you go. See, I mean, now that I've got my hand on him, and he's, of course, like he always does, tries to run away. Just going to pull his head back. See? It's a good boy. Not stressing his head. And I'm just kind of turning with him a little bit. You know, if there's a chance that he's feeling a little spicy today. I'm just going to try and guide his head in the direction that I want it to go. And see, he's exhibiting right now every sign of going right into exploration mode. And long tongue flicks, he's checking stuff out. I'm not in a hurry to manhandle him or get him moving around really. Just going to give him a second. See? And he's going to come up here perfectly fine. The only thing is I don't want his head to sit in one spot like on me like that for very long. There you go. Instead of manhandling him, I'm just going to set him on the floor. Now this is that time where the guy was, and I know you probably can't see him down here, but this is the time where the guy was coming up on him. And let me see if I can't move this camera down a little bit so you guys can see. So this is the time when the guy was coming in with the hook and trying to guide him. As you can see, this guy's not too concerned with it. But, you know, all you got to do is come in a couple feet behind their head, pick them up. You might want to go a different direction. They're stubborn. They'll do that sometimes. And he starts going that way. I'm trying to guide him into the open enclosure over here. See if he wants to go in on his own. And he clearly doesn't. So we're going to... Now one thing we can do, instead of just pulling on their tail, is we can let them start going in one direction. And that tail will come out on its own. Come on, buddy. Come on, go hang out for a little bit. And I just kind of guide his head to where I want him to go. His body will follow. All I got to do is try and get his attention directed where I want it. So all I need to do is get his attention directed where I want it, and he'll follow. You know, there's no reason to square off with him like that. Now, what he'll do a lot of times when he comes into this enclosure, is he'll hang out on the bottom for a minute. He typically goes up top, and he'll sit there and he'll tuck himself into that corner when he gets done running around. And that one, I'm right there at eye level with him. He's backed into a corner. I don't have a whole lot that I can really do over there. So hopefully he does that again. If he doesn't, I think we still kind of got the point across when we was pulling him out of the enclosure. So a lot of it too is about forward planning. So he's in here right now. When he goes out and he goes back into his enclosure, then you know, I'll want to make sure that I've got the shortest route to him. I'll do this right now. Close that door. Open this side up. Just open it up a couple feet so that when it's time for him to go in, I can just, again, just guide his head in there and let him do his thing. And there he goes, starting to go up to his spot again. I'm going to come in here real quick and kind of demonstrate what I meant about the tail on these guys. So you can see he's kind of chilling out right there. As soon as I get his tail in my hand, he starts moving a little faster. Like I said, this guy's a little bit kind of desensitized to this, but he's going back into his corner now. Hey buddy, how you doing? Hey bud, you been a good boy? Alright. I'm going to sit over here next to him for a second. You're a good boy. What you doing? What you doing here, man? You're a good boy. See, and this is still a pretty reactive snake too. I mean, I don't worry about him biting me, but he is fairly reactive. When you touch him, you know, he lets you know that he doesn't always feel 100% comfortable with it. But right now he's wrapped around that log. I'm going to try and get him off of there. And I'm just touching his tail a little bit. See? He's just got that little bit of sensitivity on there where it's going to get him moving, get him through there. Pull that out. Of course, you're just going to be intent on staying in there. So let's see if we can go ahead and get you out of here. Right now, he's wanting to go back into that corner. Pretty bad. Come on, bud. I'm just going to guide him out. He doesn't want to go. Now, since I'm wanting to get his tail out of there, I'm just going to kind of put a little bit of pressure right here. He's trying to go forward, and he can't. So his tail is going to keep coming out of there. See how I'm doing this? Is a good trick with arboreal snakes. When you can't get their tail to come unwrapped from something, he'll want to go that way, so his head will start going. But as you keep moving your hand back, his tail is just going to keep coming around it. And eventually, it's going to come off, and you can pick him out. And he does not want to go, so he's going to start wrapping up on stuff. I know, bud. I know. This is a strong snake when he wants to be stubborn. All right. Back over here so you guys can see me putting him back in. You're all wrapped around my leg now. Look at you. What are we going to do with you? Get your tail off of there. There we go. There. He's the important thing to see. And they'll do this sometimes. You just got to be careful not to step on the end of their tail. But again, just going to guide him into his enclosure. When this big boy's got a hold of you, you know you got a snake on you. There we go. And home sweet home. So then you get him put back away, and you can open the Nile monitor enclosure back up, let him come back out, close the door, go up and finish the video. So I hope that helped a little bit. Like I said, I know it's different when I don't have really defensive snakes to work with, but the techniques that I use when I'm working with them is what makes them that way. If I were to do the same thing, going in there, prodding them with the hook all the time, just poking, because I'm afraid of interacting with them, then those snakes are going to become afraid of me. So it's this positive handling and just understanding them. It's so important, and then to contrast that with the other techniques that you see people using that really upsets their animals and makes for a bad experience for everybody. So don't forget, guys, jump down, get subscribed to the channel. We've got the Patreon out there. We've got Zoom calls, Zoom meetups for all our paid Patreon members after our live streams on Saturday, which happen at 7 o'clock Eastern. The live streams happen at 7 Eastern. Typically about 8:30 is when we do the Zoom meetups. So the link for the Patreon page is always down in the description. Jump on if you like. We definitely love the support. We got some great folks in there. And absolutely get down, subscribe to the channel. Always helps to grow and get this stuff out to more people. So have an outstanding week, and we'll see you guys next time on Intrepid Exotics.